None of these things happen for no reason. You know, like there's a reason why Bear Stearns was selected to die. You know, they were selected to die because they weren't one of the boys, because they couldn't be counted on to take their licks. So they were chosen for execution. And the Bear Stearns thing really ended up being a recapitalization of JP Morgan, because they wound Bear Stearns into JP Morgan. Okay, Lehman Brothers, they did the same thing. Another recapitalization of JP Morgan, because JP Morgan was up to their necks in this too.
Reluctant Preppers provides educational awareness and commentary only. Opinions expressed do not constitute personalized financial advice. Viewers are encouraged to do their own research and seek qualified personal financial consultation before making investment decisions.
As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We're delighted to have this returning guest, Rob Kirby, a favorite of our viewers as a proprietary analyst at KirbyAnalytics.com. Rob, thanks for joining us again here on Reluctant Preppers.
Pleasure to be with you again, Dunnigan.
Today is Monday, April 8th, 2019, and in contrast with our usual habit of throwing a lot of viewers' questions at you, instead we're going to ask you if we could talk about some major trends that are not dollar-friendly that you're seeing unfolding in our current world today. Could we kick us off with something you touched on in a previous interview, and that is the principle of what's happening with one of the major components of the Dow 30, that is Boeing specifically, versus Trump's touting of trade talks with China and how that's going to be a big move forward for our country?
Sure, Dunnigan, be happy to touch on that subject. First and foremost, people would do well to realize that Boeing represents the biggest component of U.S. exports to the rest of the world. So how many airplanes Boeing is producing and selling abroad has a profound influence on the balance of trade, merchandise trade deficit for America. And as such, my feeling and my intuition tells me that any comprehensive trade deal that America would be involved with, let's just say regarding China, it would almost necessarily have to have a large Boeing component to it in terms of trying to balance the trade between America and China, because America has a big trade deficit with China. And with Boeing, seemingly to me anyway, almost admitting that their prospects for selling planes in the civilian market anyway are dead in the water. And this was evidenced by last Friday when Boeing announced that they were cutting production of the 737 model of airplane from 52 planes a month down to 42 planes a month, which represents almost a 20% decline in production. And, you know, this is only roughly a month after the 737 fleet globally was grounded. And so my question becomes, what are the prospects for Boeing going forward? Is Boeing likely to be reducing the number of 737s being produced on a monthly basis? Are we likely to see further cuts in the near future? My guess is probably yes, because I feel that much of the world has lost faith in Boeing to supply a product that people can trust and believe in. And the ramifications and implications as that reverberates back through the supply chain, being one of America's biggest dollar producers contributing to the balance of trade picture, I have to wonder if America could very likely and conceivably be, facing some sort of a recession in the relatively near future. And this is just based on Boeing alone, because Boeing is that important to the trade picture. So to me, what's occurred at Boeing it muddies the likelihood of there being a comprehensive trade agreement, and it also increases the likelihood that we see some sort of a recession, or certainly it takes the starch out of the all's well in the American economy picture that's being fed to us as a narrative in the mainstream financial press. So anyway, both of these things are negative developments, and they're not dollar friendly. Makes you kind of wonder how successful America's going to be, like how successful the dollar is going to be on a go-forward basis, and what kind of appetite there's going to be globally for U.S. government debt, because the the budget deficits continue to grow, and I mean, I remember a time when foreign participation in U.S. government debt auctions was essential and a requirement. That doesn't seem to be the case so much these days, as foreigners have been quite absent from U.S. government debt auctions. So things don't look completely friendly for the dollar or the dollar's prospects going forward. And that should give a lot of people reason for some concern, I believe.
You're right. You and others who we had on last year talked about Russia and China potentially pivoting away from and divesting themselves of U.S. debt. And you say, that the willingness to purchase new U.S. debt is just dried up from an external country standpoint. So who is purchasing the debt? And you've talked to us in the past about how we've never had a failed bond auction.
Well, to me, I find that incredibly odd too, because I have made mention of that on numerous occasions and in numerous interviews in different places. The United States is the only debt issuing sovereign in the world that I'm aware of that has never had a failed bond auction. And you see, I come from a background where I was engaged in being a broker of U.S. government debt and Canadian government debt and provincial debt, and as a participant and a player in those markets for quite some time of my professional working life, Germany, who is a better credit than America, has had failed bond auctions. Mm-hmm. Okay, but America, who's a lesser credit, who issues way more debt, they've never had one. Canada has had failed bond auctions or abandoned bond auctions. But I mean, the notion that America has never ever had a failed bond auction sort of tells me, like, the odds of that being natural or plausible is like a Navy saying that they have a fleet of ships and none of them have ever sunk. Mm-hmm. And yet they've been engaged in wars and they've been engaged in battles and naval engagements, but their ships never sink. So, you can think about that if you want to. You might want to think long and hard on that, because the odds that this would be natural don't really measure up when you compare apples to apples with other debt issuing sovereign entities.
You've mentioned also, speaking of China and Russia, you've mentioned also about rising geopolitical tensions surrounding Venezuela, and that being part of a picture that doesn't bode well for these harmonious, expanding trade agreements and everything going forward. What do you see happening there?
Well, Russia currently has military boots on the ground in Venezuela. China currently has military boots on the ground in Venezuela, and to me this becomes or makes the prospects of America doing a foreign intervention in Venezuela, or doing a military intervention in Venezuela, it makes it a lot more problematic, and it makes the whole idea, in past interventions that America has engaged in, like when America attacked Iraq, they had a coalition of countries supporting them. When America attacked Libya, they had a coalition of countries supporting them. I don't see there being a coalition of allies of America joining them to fight the Russians and the Chinese and the Venezuelans in Venezuela, because I don't believe there's going to be any foreign appetite to become engaged in a conflict with major powers that currently have boots on the ground in Venezuela. And this becomes very, very problematic. I mean, we're told even in the alternative press, we're told that the prospects of America becoming militarily engaged in Venezuela has to do with fears of a collapsing Venezuela sending a throng of migrants or possible migrants forward or northward to America, creating a bigger problem on the southern border. I don't buy into that narrative for a minute, because I believe that it has everything to do with Venezuela selling their oil, or the oil, or much of the oil they are producing. They're selling it for non-dollar, as in they're selling it for Chinese currency. And I feel that this has a very, very, very big impact on why America feels that there needs to be regime change in Venezuela, despite the narratives that are coming out of the mainstream. Because it just seems to me, Dunnigan, right now, everything is about the dollar. I mean, there are tensions right now between America and Venezuela. There are tensions, and there were tensions between America and Libya, and Libya came out on the short end of the stick on that one. Tensions were between America and Iraq, and Iraq was invaded. America has ongoing issues with Iran. Like America doesn't have any issues with countries that produce broccoli or Brussels sprouts. But they do have plenty of problems with countries around the world who produce oil or energy, and they want to sell it in other than dollars. And for those who might point out, well, Syria doesn't produce a lot of oil. Well, Syria may very well not produce a lot of oil, but Syria happens to be a strategic piece of property where very key pipelines were being proposed to run through to basically have Russia supply Western Europe and other countries with oil. The principal pipelines were proposed to run through Syria. And so there's an energy component there too, but so it just seems to me that the real issue that is confronting America and America's position as the world's reserve currency with the dollar have to do with energy, and truth be told, I really believe that a big part of the reason why America has ramped up their shale oil production is because America needs to have more oil on the world market priced in dollars. The percentage of world oil production priced in dollars has diminished in recent years, with China basically demanding that they pay in their currency, and with obliging countries, America's share of the global petroleum market is diminishing. And one way to offset or to counter such a thing would naturally be to America to boost production of oil, even if it's on a short-term basis, to buy them some time. And I feel that may very well be the motivation behind producing shale oil. So what I'm kind of saying here is shale oil might be being produced even if the economics don't support it, simply because it acts as a big sponge, because America clearly won't be selling any shale oil anywhere to anyone in other than dollars. And isn't it interesting that my whole lifetime, and I just turned 59, but my whole life America's been an oil importer, and America only became an oil exporter in the last year with shale oil, which is the most expensive oil on the planet to produce. Okay, and that sort of sticks out like a sore thumb to me, and I can almost hear a bell ringing that it's signaling trouble in the petrodollar market, and America needs to produce this oil simply because they need to give other foreign countries a reason to hold dollars, and that's to buy American oil.
One corroborating venue that you didn't mention was Saudi Arabia, and they're pivoting to the east as well.
Yes, absolutely. Saudi Arabia has been pivoting to the east. Saudi Arabia has been toying with the idea, if they haven't already made the purchases, and that's for the Russian air missile defense system, the S-400, which is basically an American plane killer. And the other big issue is the legislation that's been floating around, American Congress, to take away the sovereign immunity that OPEC countries have enjoyed, basically for rigging the price of oil, and because there has been a want on the part of many players for many years to launch class action lawsuits against OPEC countries. And this, I mean, up until, or let's just say from 2000 or 2001 onward, these OPEC countries have enjoyed
immunity
for anything relating to oil. And the mood of Congress under Trump has been that this immunity might be revoked. To which Saudi Arabia has issued stern warnings that if this were to occur, that their support for the dollar going forward might very well be in question. So, and it's just another not dollar-friendly item on the menu. The other big thing that's going on, Italy's now run by populists, right? I don't know if you're aware. The Five-Star Movement is in control in Italy. So Italian is now run by populist people. And the populist people made a statement over the weekend that they viewed the sovereign Italian gold as belonging to...
Oh, yeah. The people, not to the banks.
Banker.
Yeah.
Okay, so this public statement was made this weekend, but 2 weeks ago, Mario Draghi, and you gotta understand who Draghi is, okay? Because Draghi, he's Italian. He's the former finance minister of Italy, and 2 weeks ago he made a statement that nobody's allowed to do anything with a reserve asset unless they have the express written consent of the European Central Bank. So no country that's a member of the euro can do anything with a reserve asset unless they have or given permission by the European Central Bank. Okay, so Draghi knew this was coming.
Uh-huh.
Draghi was the finance minister of Italy in 1998 when long-term capital went under. One of the big investors in long-term capital was the Bank of Italy, central bank. Okay? And what happened was the central bank, to get money to invest in long-term capital, the Central Bank of Italy was advised by Goldman Sachs to lease gold. So they leased like 400 tons of gold. And when that happens, the gold gets sold into the market. So then they had the money. They invested the money with long-term capital. Long-term capital then went and made a huge bet on Russian bonds. The Russian government defaulted on the bonds. So now Italy didn't have the money and they didn't have the gold. Okay? So that had to be covered up, because if it had become publicly known, the Italian sovereign finances were in really bad shape in 1998. And that's what actually pushed them into doing the lease of the gold, because they were going to invest the proceeds with a can't miss guaranteed return of the Nobel laureates running long-term capital. Okay? So if the world knew that Italy lost the gold and the money, Italy wouldn't have qualified for the euro, and there wouldn't have been a euro. There wouldn't have been a euro. It would have been stillborn. Okay, so that all got covered up, and the guy who was Long-Term Capital's legal counsel, chief legal counsel, was James Rickards. Okay, and it was James Rickards who did the workout, very, very on the hush-hush, and everyone had to swear to silence, and that was worked out in the offices of the New York Federal Reserve, with Rickards acting as the point man. Okay, so that's what, and then of course Draghi was rewarded for his silence, because Goldman Sachs made him the chairman of Goldman Sachs International, which is basically Goldman Sachs Europe. So he was bought off, and Rickards of course runs around talking like he knows that gold's a great investment. Well, of course he knows it's a great investment. He knows the chicanery that goes on in the gold market. But I mean, he's a very conflicted guy, because he knows the kind of crap that goes on in the international gold market. But he can't talk about it. You see, because he's sworn to secrecy too. And he's part of the globalist. He's a Mr. Fix-It. He's the GIMP. Rickards is the GIMP for the globalists on the monetary front. He's a plug and play. And if you look at where Rickards has appeared, if you read the guy's CV, it reads like something out of a superhero comic anyway. But I mean, you look at where Rickards shows up in history, okay? You read his own CV. He crows about being negotiating the release of the American hostages when they were taken when Jimmy Carter was president at the fall when the Islamic people took over in Iran. Okay, he negotiated the release of the hostages. Okay, so Jimmy Carter, he was brought into the picture under the Carter administration, Democrat. Okay, he appears as the long-term capital chief legal counsel when long-term's going down. Boy, just when there happened to be a Clinton, another Democrat in power. Okay, the guy disappears off the radar for the entire 8 years of George W. Bush. Okay, and then he resurfaces like a stealth submarine and immediately becomes a media darling again when Obama, another Democrat, takes stage. So, and where's old handsome Jim been lately? Well, there's a Republican in the White House, so you don't see too much of Jim anymore. Okay? Anyway, all I'm saying, the guy he's a complete Democrat globalist tool. And there's no other way I can describe him. And he's an extremely conflicted guy. And he can't talk honestly about, what he does is he mixes kernels of truth. Like, I can sit around and chuckle and make anecdotal stories about how good gold is. But I mean, and he does that. So those are your kernels of truth. But what does he pose as an alternative? What is it that stands out to you, if anything? What does Rickards propose as an alternative to the current system?
SDR. Yeah.
SDRs. Every chance he gets, that's SDRs. Well, SDRs are controlled by the same guys that were in control of the fiat money system. So Rickards is saying that the globalists deserve a do-over. I don't believe they deserve a do-over. And Rickards cannot sit down and talk square and honestly about what's really occurred, because Rickards has blackout areas where he's not allowed to talk. Okay, because everyone who was involved in that long-term capital workout was sworn to secrecy. Okay, and the only real leak that ever came out of it, because John Merriweather, who ran it, and the Nobel laureates, nobody can get an interview with them. They don't talk can't and won't and never will talk about it. And the only entity where anything ever leaked out of was a company called Bear Stearns, and they were some pissed because in the workout they realized, and it became obvious to them that the boys were f***ing with gold, and everyone at that table was being asked to take a haircut, and the guys at Bear Stearns were crankier than shit, and they said, "Why should we take a haircut? Because you guys are f***ing with gold. You know, like we got nothing to do with gold. We don't want to take a haircut over this because you guys f*** with gold." So then what happened? What happened in 2007 when the subprime crisis blew up? Okay, Bear Stearns was taken down because they had subprime paper that failed. Okay, but you know what? Every investment bank in America were loaded to the gunnels with that shit. Okay, Bear Stearns was taken down because they had subprime paper. Understand this also. When subprime failed, it was the first time in the history of credit markets, in the entire history of humanity, it was the first time AAA paper had ever failed. Okay, AAA paper does not fail. This was garbage paper. This was junk. This was shit that shouldn't even have been rated junk. And of course it failed. It was designed to fail. But Bear Stearns paid the price. Not Goldman Sachs, not Merrill Lynch, not Lehman Brothers, not Morgan Stanley. They all got to get off. But Bear Stearns was taken down because they weren't a team player back in 1998 when everyone had to take a haircut and shut up about it. And they squawked, and it leaked, and it leaked through a treatise that was written by John Embry and Andrew Hepburn called "Not Free, Not Fair," and it was published by Eric Sprott's company. So you see. Anyway, and this all plays back into this Italy thing too, because everything is so convoluted and so twisted and tied together.
Right, and you mentioned in passing about the other world currencies that are vying for the U.S. Potentially as a world reserve currency. What do you see playing out on the ground, or if you really back away from this, what's the real big picture happening about U.S. reserve currency status?
Well, I mean, the world has had many reserve currencies, like through the last sort of 500-600 years, or over very, very long time periods. And if one looks at the length of time other currencies have had as the world's reserve currency, and somebody sent me a graphic of this, Dunnigan, which I might try to dig up that you can maybe post with the interview, just as a graphic. But if you look at on a chart the amount of time that previous 6 or 7 or 8 currencies have had as their time in the sun as the world's reserve currency, the block that is the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency is roughly the same size. And the funny thing is, all of these sovereign currencies that enjoyed world reserve currency status, the size of them and the length of time they all enjoyed this time, as the big currency in the world. The time that each one enjoyed it is virtually the same. And it's uncanny when you look at the chart with the blocks on the chart. The blocks are taking up a time period on the chart, and all the blocks are almost virtually identical in size. And America's block on the chart looks to be sort of as big as any of them on the chart, which makes one wonder. At least it makes me wonder if maybe things are winding up for the dollar as it's as its time in the sun as the world's reserve currency, and to hasten that thought, or at least fuel for the fire for that thought, Dunnigan, for me in really really recent times, has been the evidence that's been uncovered by Catherine Fitz and Dr. Skidmore, that it's very likely that minimum 21 trillion extra dollars have been printed out of thin air, are in existence, and are hidden and siloed in black boxes like the Exchange Stabilization Fund. And because what it really comes down to, while we are told that dollars are scarce, and while we are told that dollars are in bigger demand than supply, can satisfy, and I like to acknowledge that for people like you and I, Dunnigan, dollars or fiat currency isn't short supply, because we're subject to things like paying income tax and reporting our income.
And anti-counterfeiting laws.
Anti-counterfeiting laws. We can't print our own money. But isn't it interesting that after the revelations from Catherine Fitz and Dr. Skidmore, where they've documented that 21 trillion went through the books, unaccounted for money, went through the books of two government agencies, Department of Defense and Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, that isn't it amazing? Right after they made these allegations, the White House ordered a full audit of the Department of Defense, first time in the history. And after this audit got underway, accounting regulations were basically reformulated under FASB. So the regulators then made it okay that if something was to deal with national security, that basically the U.S. government didn't need to show us their financial books. So while dollars are made very dear to us, the American government at the same time has been basically been excused of accounting. So, and this is on the back of allegations of 21 trillion extra dollars minimum of being created and I would say siloed. So while dollars are dear to us, I'm going to suggest that dollars aren't nearly as dear to the federal government in America as we might have previously believed. And this intuitively makes a lot of sense to me anyway, Dunnigan. I look at the number of trillions that have been thrown into a black hole in the Middle East over the last 10 or 15 years. And you see, my intuition tells me that if dollars were really as scarce as you and I are led to believe, there's no way 7 trillion of them would have been thrown into that dark black hole. And but if one has a secret stash or has siloed 21 or more trillion in dark places, one might be inclined to act as if they had an endless amount of money. And all I'm saying is the actions of the people calling the shots are more consistent with the notion that they believe money has no consequence and that they have an endless supply, more so than believing that money is scarce. And because money only seems to be scarce when it's for the little people, and when it can have an impact on prices in the domestic economy. Like, it's fine to spend 7 trillion blowing up stuff in the Middle East, but you wouldn't want to let that 7 trillion loose in the domestic economy, because then you would really feel the effects of monetary inflation, as in rising prices, which would without a doubt seal the deal that the currency's been undermined. It's all about the money. It's all about the money. It's all about the stewardship of the world's reserve currency. Like, unthinkable things have been done. And and it can't go on forever, because the rest of the world, it's going to come to blows. The rest of the world isn't going to put up with this shit. And and if it means there's going to be a nuclear war, then there will. Because you know what? The rest of the world ain't going to put up with this bullshit forever. You guys get to be the kings. You guys get to print up. You guys get to print up more money than has ever been created in the world and have it as your secret stash to do whatever you want with whenever you want. Like the rest of the world, like already Russia won't sell any gold to Russia will not allow the export of gold. Okay? So things are being withheld from the international market. You know why? Because they know they're mispriced. And they know they're not going to get fair value in return. And if you think that's going to mysteriously change, it's not. It's going to get worse. You know why? Because they don't trust the money. And they're not going to gain trust for the money with the current posture of any American administration. Because Trump knows that I'm convinced that Trump knows this thing is completely off the rails. And he's basically trying to talk. I think he's trying to talk the world down from a precarious ledge, because I think he knows how badly screwed up everything is. But what can he do? He can't come out and say we're all toast. Or then it becomes a self-fulfilling thing overnight. There'd be World War VIII overnight, and so he can't do that. And plus, so much of this shit is by definition national security, and he's not allowed to divulge as the president. He can't do that.
So a lot of what you're talking about, it reminds me of the basic premise and the adage about watch what they do and not what they say, watch where the money's going. So if people, ordinary people like me or people who are listening to this realize that they're not going to be able to know all this stuff, but they go, well, the people who are in the know, if they see what the Russians are doing, what the Chinese are doing, what the Indians are doing,
they're hoarding gold.
Yep.
They're hoarding gold. And man, they're hoarding gold because they have information they have information that's not widely available.
Mm-hmm.
I do my own research. And I have faith in my own work. And I know people that work with them. And I know what their sentiments are. I know for a fact China will not take one stick. They will not take one bar of gold from the West without resmelting it. Okay? Not one bar. Every ounce of gold that they procure from the West, which is a lot, it's all remelted and reassayed. Every bit of it. Because they don't trust the LBMA to give them bars that are pure or what they're purported to be. So anyway, and that's a fact, okay? That is a complete fact. So why all the distrust? Think about it. Tungsten lace bars, they're around too. Have people tried to sell those as credible gold? Yep. And those are siloed too. Those are siloed in places, got to ask yourself a question. Why is it when the Germans, who had gold on deposit at the Federal Reserve, the Germans initially said to the Fed, we'd like to audit our gold. We'd like to come in, basically they'd like to inspect the bars, assay some of them, and do an audit. That's what an audit is in gold. And the Fed told the Germans, no, you can't do that. And they said, made up some bullshit excuse, we don't have the room for you to come in and do an audit. Really? That's like going to the Ford dealership and them saying they don't have a service bay to fix a car. If you're in the business of storing gold, you have rooms and facilities to assay the shit. Otherwise, how do you know what you're taking in? So, I mean, it's non-credible. So the Germans said, can we audit our gold? The Fed told them to go away. And then they said, okay, you don't want to let us audit our gold. We'd like some of our gold back. And they said, go away. Okay. What's the problem? Like, why was the Fed saying that to the Germans if they really had their gold? And if it really is gold? So then through some convoluted bullshit, the Germans claim to have got some gold back, I don't know, a year ago or something.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I don't know. Do you think the gold they got back might have been was the same gold as that they were asking for, a few years earlier?
They had to wait a long time for it, and they only got a fraction of it.
I don't know. Like, does it pass the smell test? Not mine.
Mm-hmm.
So, and why is it this shit appears always in gold? There's never a problem with broccoli, whether you ship me real broccoli or not. But with gold, yeah. And,
So you describe the behavior of a government bureaucrat or whoever who's got an unlimited checkbook. What do you advise in the abstract for an ordinary person who is subject to scarce money limitations and wants to protect themselves from the unreasonable risks that are posed to their family from all of these hijinks you've been describing?
Well, here it comes back to the whole prepper proposition done again. And I would only remind people that foreign countries like China, like Russia, and others have realized, at least I believe, have realized the chicanery that's been resorted to by the stewards of the petrodollar reserve currency, and they are very far up the curve in understanding the amount of deceit that there's been in global monetary affairs, which is why they are conducting themselves in the manner in which they are, creating alternatives and parallel structures to the current, IMF and World Bank, and this is the infrastructure that's being put in place by the non-dollar countries, the Asian countries, and Russia, to basically survive and operate, and hopefully on their part, I would say, to not miss a beat when the world is put on a system that is non-dollar, where the dollar is not required at all. So my feeling that for the average person, if you have investable assets, you might want to really, really think hard about dedicating or allocating a portion of your investable net worth in real stuff that will survive a currency reset or will survive or reprice itself when we, in my view, reach the eventuality that the dollar will fall as the world's reserve currency, and there will be a new reserve currency regime, which in my view is very likely to be, given the discrediting that fiat money will have ultimately been dealt, any replacement vehicle or currency necessarily, in my view, will have to have a convertibility factor to it, and it will have to be backed by real stuff. And to me, the centerpiece of real stuff would include gold and silver, and it might very well have an energy component, as in, X amount of a barrel of oil, and it might very well have an agricultural component in terms of it being worth, so much of a bushel of wheat or some other major agricultural staple. So this is what I see coming, and the way you protect yourself is you raise your exposure to real stuff, the items that I just mentioned, and to me it's high time people really, really think this over and think it over very carefully, and because it should have a big influence on what people do in the near future financially.
We've been speaking with Rob Kirby, proprietary analyst and founder of KirbyAnalytics.com. Rob, as always, thank you for joining us here on Reluctant Preppers.
My pleasure sharing time and thought with you.
With surprising new concerns expressed about Dunnigan's changing hairstyle, one viewer even commented, "That hair is dyed, fried, and laid to the side." But what you're not being told is Dunnigan's hair needs no dye thanks to the wonderful vitamin and mineral regimen that Melody recommends, and is not laid to the side to cover any bald spot either, since Dunnigan's full head of hair is exceptionally well attached. However, Dunnigan does use hair products only as a disaster prevention because he's at severe risk of catastrophic emergency situations. But although there may be some changes you don't like to hair, this is one kind of change you'll definitely want to have on hand if the situation gets hairy. Pure silver. And for a limited time, your first ounce of silver can be purchased at spot price with free shipping on orders over $99 by going to sdbullion.com/RP. And you'll be supporting Reluctant Preppers as well. It's within your grasp to get your hands on the perfect change for hairy situations at sdbullion.com/RP. P.S. Dunnigan was not harmed in the making of this video. Hey, Reluctant Preppers. If you haven't heard, we've already started our monthly 1-ounce U.S. Silver Eagle thank you gift to one active Patreon subscriber each month, signed by your host, Dunnigan Kaiser. And you don't want to miss out on that.
Please help us grow by subscribing today at patreon.com/reluctantpreppers.